We have come too far, we won't turn around. We'll flood the streets for climate, we are New York bound.
Introduce your very own Chism from 350 Maine. So clap it up for Lee.
It's really wonderful to see you all come out for this, as Rico said, on a Thursday night. For this little part of our evening, I rather arbitrarily have to sort of share some of the things that are going on. And I asked a couple of people to do that, but when I say it was arbitrary, I could have asked any of you. I mean, I see Sierra Club, as noted, represented, and NRCM, and Citizens Climate Lobby, and a host of others here. And I just thank you for coming. I wish we could give you time to talk about what you're doing. But for now, I think we're going to go Reed, Sarah, Taryn, in that order. Reed, come on.
Wow, great. Thanks so much for being here. There's people here I don't know. That's very exciting. We got organized in 350 Maine in January of 2012. And what we saw and why we did it was that we wanted to put together a grassroots climate group in Maine. We saw a lot of environmental groups, but we really wanted to zero in on the climate and work on that. And part of our mission is clearly to build a grassroots movement to solve the climate change. And when we talk about how we're going to get there, one of the things we quickly did was see 350.org's theory of change. And their idea is that if people organize in their communities across the world, then over time we will generate the political will necessary to overpower our opposition and pass strong international and climate policies. Well, isn't that what just happened in South Portland? I mean, we organized in our communities and against all conventional wisdom, convinced the decision makers, policy makers, that we would stand behind them if they took a stand for climate change and against fossil fuels. And that's what we've been doing ever since we started. And so what we do is we target the fossil fuel industry. We want to shut it down, but we also want to be able to present good solutions to the fossil fuel madness that we're involved in. So much of what we do in terms of the tactics and campaigns we take on are to neutralize carbon, but also talk about alternatives and how we can get out of the madness we're surrounded in. And so, like, we just had the South Portland thing, we've done educationals. You know, a lot of us, we partnered with NRCM here in Portland for the tar sands exposed. We partnered with Penobscots up in Orono for the same program. Another educational was the climate solutions in March. That was very big. Last year, you know, the South Portland, we had a preamble. We took on the DCP tank in Searsport and joined with Tanks But No Tanks. So we work well with coalitions. This is something we do. We realize we're not going to do it ourselves, but there's a lot of ways we can do things. And when we got started, we were into stunts. You know, we did the blow the whistles, we did connect the dots. To connect the dots, one of the things we did was set up a Burma Shave ad with people all along Route 1 in Belfast. That was just like a stunt. But that and the Thanks But No Tanks put together a core of people. So there's many ways that 350 Maine reaches out to the grassroots, and it's really at the grassroots that we're interested in working, because that's where we can show that we have the real power, and that politicians will realize that if they don't change, we'll throw them out and we'll make the changes ourselves.
Hi everyone, I'm The Chance, also with 350 Maine. I'm co-coordinator with the tar sands team. And I was thinking that Reed was going to do most of this, so when Lee suddenly said my name, I'm like, oh dear. But I guess I'll just use a quick moment to just talk about the fact that within the tar sands team, it's just a great example of how any organization can take a specific interest and do all kinds of great grassroots mobilizing around it. So 4 years ago, no one in Maine was talking about tar sands. No one in New England was really thinking about it. And then suddenly when the threat came upon us that this pipeline might get reversed, suddenly you had people all across Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and trickling out beyond that, thinking about this and thinking, well, what is this product and what does it mean to be flowing through our communities? And so suddenly, out of nowhere, this huge geographic region got mobilized around tar sands, but not just tar sands. People used it to amplify the voice about climate change. And then what's near and dear to my heart is then we were able to also make sure people started thinking about the fact that this isn't just a threat here, but it's a reality up in Alberta, Canada. That's one thing that's really exciting to see here in Maine, is that people aren't really stuck in that NIMBY mentality. When you talk to people about something that's going on, and you talk about something that's happening far, far away from them, they really are global citizens. They think about the fact that, well, that's not okay here and it's not okay anywhere. So it's been really exciting to watch how one specific fight within the climate change movement can really sort of amplify the environmental justice issues that lots of times people aren't thinking about or just simply aren't aware of. So I think there's a great opportunity here with us all going to New York City, continue to let folks know that voices are rising. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Taryn Holly. I'm the campaign instructor for Environment Maine. Environment Maine, for those who aren't familiar, is a statewide environmental organizing and advocacy group. And we are both policy people and organizers. We mostly think of ourselves as an outside game group. So we work a lot in Augusta, but for us it's not just about figuring out the right policy piece and who the right legislators are, but whose voices we can raise from across the state and mobilize to come into Augusta and shape the conversation. Climate change is probably the best example of an issue that requires an outside game strategy. There ain't nothing getting through Washington now or anytime soon, and the People's Climate March is a fantastic example of putting the pressure on. So Sarah and I have about half an hour budgeted here to talk about the principles of mass mobilization. And then just to frame up the section a little bit, the goal is to get us all thinking about, from a kind of bird's eye view or 30,000 foot perspective, how we approach mass mobilization. So we're going to start with goals, and this is going to be part write stuff down on your own, part shout it out, group brainstorm. What do people think is a number? What's a number for how many people we can bring from the beautiful state of Maine to New York City for the People's March? Toss it out. 1,000. Okay, we've got 1,000. What else? 400. 400? 10,000. 10,000? This is like fitting for the lecture style auditorium we're in. It's like a quiz. How many people can you personally recruit? That's the next question. So this is a one-on-one personal recruitment. This person says, I'm in New York because of Bob who recruited me. Okay, and then now I'm going to do an exercise, and if this is a mental math exercise because you don't have a piece of paper, this is in your head. If you do have a piece of paper, go ahead and cross off those numbers. and double them. If you started really big, the doubling may or may not be realistic. But we're going to come back to these doubled numbers, because the concept here is we all have ideas in our head on what's possible, what's realistic, and we basically need to like smash that into a million little pieces and rebuild it through the principles of recruitment that we're about to talk about. And then after we talk about these, we're going to come back and see if we feel like the doubled numbers are a little bit more realistic. Maybe in some cases they still totally won't be, but this is an exercise. All right, so we've got our numbers, and now we're going to talk about the principles, and Sarah's going to kick us off with the first one, and I'm going to do a little note-taking while she talks.
Okay. So the first thing when you think about mass mobilization is that doesn't feel very personal, right? Going down 250,000 people, trying to make someone excited about that, it starts to maybe stop feeling personal. And so the key is when recruiting for mass mobilization, this rumor is actually very personal. That's what makes this so real and so powerful, is you've got to make it about you. You've got to make it about why you think it's so important to show up on September 21st. You've got to share your personal story. It's all going to be about one conversation, one-on-one, with your friends, with your old college roommate that you haven't talked to in 20 years, with your first cousin, all your old bridesmaids, and all the people that you haven't chatted with, all your Facebook friends, every single person, one by one by one. You pick up the phone, you send the email, you make it personal. So what's those stories? Earlier we heard Rico, and I was suddenly finding myself sitting on the end of my chair listening to his story about Hurricane Sandy. That felt really real to me. For me, the stories I always go back to is about my son. My youngest son suffers from chronic asthma. I've gotten the call from the hospital or from the school that his nebulizer isn't working, and they're rushing him by ambulance to the hospital. So that's a real story that I can just share with someone and say, asthma is a growing reality throughout our country. There's children and adults suffering and dying every single day from asthma. So what's your story? Do you have a neighbor that's been suffering for 4 years from Lyme disease? Do you feel like you can't let your kids play out in the yard anymore, out and go set up a tent in the backyards in the woods you used to play in as a kid because you're afraid they're going to get Lyme disease or they're going to get some mosquito-borne illness? What's the story that makes it real to you? We've got a lot of them here in Maine. So share that story and share it over and over again. Get in front of your church, get in front of your business, get in front of all of the networks that you have, and make it personal. So that's the very first step and most important step. So right now I want all of you to take a quick second to think about what's your personal story, what's your narrative? Why are you going to New York City? Why did you come here tonight? Think about it. Think about what the big picture pieces as well, then push it out a little bit more from the heart to the collective heart that we all share. What's this big thing that we're all facing in your mind? What does this really stand for? So what's that bigger narrative of the voices rising in the environmental justice movement or whatever it is? Now stop and share that story, please, with the person sitting next to you. Take 2 minutes each of you to tell your story.
That's wonder, or we could just don't want to leave it thinking about it.
Okay, you can hear my voice clap once. You can hear my voice clap twice. Okay, thanks everyone for doing that. It was fun to hear all the chatter. Does anybody want to share a story that they heard or their own story?
I want to share mine, and that's that 10 days ago we had a microburst in York. It's our second in 3 years. They are incredibly frightening. Everything is out of your control if you're in the path. I watched 250-year-old trees. I didn't actually see them down. I saw them afterwards that went down. But 3 houses had huge trees go into them. We had a couple of cars crushed. It didn't used to happen.
Anybody else?
I've seen the price of food go up exponentially in my lifetime, and I come from a low-income background, and so I've sort of predestined my children to probably struggle financially somewhat as they come out into the world, and I'm very nervous about what it's going to mean for them feeding themselves. And and I want to set an example to them now that they need to do something, that we can do something. There's so much power in each person, so I want them to see that and feel empowered even if it's hard for them.
Yeah, I've been thinking that our air, our food, our water, things we need to survive are slowly being swallowed up by all the corporations. And the one thing they really can't touch is our sense of purpose. And my feeling is that we can have solidarity and purpose, and we can change things through that.
That's right.
Well, I don't want to live in a country that doesn't care enough about its children to save the world for them.
Is anybody else?
Yeah, kind of similarly related. I mean, I think about it in terms of the future for the children, my grandchildren, a couple of great-grandchildren, and all the great-grandchildren of all the species. And what kind of a, do we want to leave a living, breathing earth for them? And when they ask me, Grammy, what did you do? I want to be able to say what I did and kind of motivate them.
So, if you think about all those stories we just heard, they all came from here, right? Lots of times when you think about this big project, this huge undertaking, getting 250,000 people to New York City, or even us with the goal of 1,000 or 10,000, you start to think, well, what's the 10-point plan? How do we get from point A to point G? And it's not necessarily going to be this fact-checking. We're not going to necessarily have all these facts like we usually do when we get up and speak to people about climate change. It's not necessarily like that. It's really about those stories. It's about compelling people to move forward, because when they get asked the question, what did you do to help stop this? And the children that come after us, that we can say, well, this is what I did. Thank you.
So the first principle here is to make it personal for you. And then the next principle that I'm going to talk about is to make it personal for them, for the person that you're talking to. Most people, and I think including people in this room, don't necessarily feel their own power on a day-to-day basis. There are lots of institutional reasons for that. Don't necessarily see themselves as agents of change or activists or organizers or leaders. And the concept of a mass mobilization activist movement might actually be a turn-off to some people. It's certainly a turn-on to a certain select group of people, maybe 1,000 of them in Maine, but we've got to reach people's core values and make it personal and connect on those values to move the numbers that we want to see. So one thing here to think about is all the different types of things that motivate people. Do you mind if I share what you had said earlier? Okay. When we were doing the, what did we call it? Share, the buddy share? Pair share. When we were doing the pair share, Dick said one of his reasons is that this is a moment, this is going to be a moment, we want to be able to say to our grandkids, I was there. And I think, yes, cool, me too. It is a moment, and I do want to be able to picture myself in the future telling my grandkids I was there. That is motivating to Dick, it's motivating to me. It might not be motivating to someone else. I think there are a lot of overlapping motivations, but a pitfall that we tend to fall into is thinking that everyone else's motivations are the same as our own. So let's just do popcorn style here, a little bit of brainstorm on the different things that might motivate someone to go to New York. And we've heard some of these already coming out in different personal stories. What do you think? Yeah.
They missed Woodstock.
I think that's funny. I'm a little too young to totally 100% get it.
Yep, I can see the memes now.
If you can get people to tell you their core value, what it is that's most important to them, and can tell them how it's going to be effective.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So what are some of these different motivations we can get at? Yep.
If they've never been in a rally that's that big, but just been in a rally and feel the power and the energy, and just it's really pretty amazing.
Yeah, just a new experience of being in a big old rally. Yeah.
A lot of people feel helpless and overwhelmed, and often action is a good way to cope with terrible news. And if you can say, here's something you can do.
Yeah. So it's something you can do.
Their affinity
Action
group,
you can take.
sorry,
Yep, go ahead.
their affinity group is going either friends or faith group or union or whatever.
Yep, we all like to feel like something bigger than ourselves. That gets to the rally thing. Maybe it's you belong to a 350 or a club or a group. Yeah.
Along those lines, it's like being around that number of other people, feeling like you're not alone, because a lot of times this is a really makes you feel really helpless and alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Feeling like you're not alone. Yeah.
Well, a lot of us spoke about wanting it to be different for our children, but I think as younger people can speak for themselves. But that there's like wanting it to be different for ourselves, wanting it not, wanting opportunities now.
Sure. Yeah. There's some so what you might think of as altruistic reasons, there's some very real, personal motivations, whether it's a frontline community or looking ahead at the next 8 years of your own life and thinking, oh my gosh, you guys all screwed this up so badly. Yeah.
I think there are moments in time when it's important to act day to day, hour to hour, but definitely historically in larger time periods. And this is one that is absolutely loaded to be a part of history.
Yeah. It's a little bit similar to, I think it's this concept of being part of that moment.
So if you can go, you need to go because there are people who would like to go and can't.
Yep. Sense of obligation or responsibility. Yep. This is one that might feel a little silly, but I think is actually going to be a real thing. Like the ability to snap a selfie in Times Square with a rally in after you. Not missing out on the social media presence moment. Yep. What else? Other motivations.
That people might feel better about themselves if they actually do this.
Sure.
This is a little, it's not quite in keeping with what you're asking for, but I'm always astounded when you tell somebody you're going to do something like this, and they say, good for you. It's so great that you're doing that. It's not like climate change is going to just seek me out personally. So what do you do about that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So how do you get at these motivations? How do you get at the values to connect with the value you're trying to get at in your own story? What are some of the open-ended questions you might ask? Yeah.
I'll just show how excited you are. Like you talked about, show them more what my person can do. Because I see that a lot. I do a lot of organizing a lot of apolitical, apathetic people, and that's the only thing that I found works is just showing them my excitement and why I care, and then they just tag along because they're curious, and then they start to care.
It's when
You can ask them how they feel about climate change, and then explain to them that instead of being depressed and miserable about it, once you get into action, it's gone.
So ask them how they feel about climate change. Yeah. Other questions, Reed?
Well, just work on what is their passion and find out how you can connect your interest to their interest.
On that same line, find out what their what they find wrong in the world, because everything's connected to everything else. All these issues are connected to climate change, even if they don't see it that way. And so find out what their issue is and draw that connection for them.
Yeah.
I think they have to take on responsibility for what the government isn't doing.
Now, one thing to note just in the relationship between the first two principles, which is first make it personal about you and then make it personal about them, is that it can be helpful to have some kind of back pocket phrases to help with that transition. Because, part of these are learned skills. The skill of sharing to elicit a response and then getting someone to open up. And the transition sentence can be as simple as, that's my take on it. What do you think? Or, that's what I've experienced. Have you seen something like this? That's what I believe. What do you believe? So it's the sharing and then actually trying to open up space to then listen and ask something open-ended that will allow someone to really get at those values. Yeah, Oh, okay. I thought you were raising your hand to talk. We have 5 minutes. We're going to move along. That's the second
principal. So you're going to trademark.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. We thought we were going to be so quick. We're having so much fun. So the next principle for mass mobilization is casting a wide net. So making sure that we speak beyond the choir, but also to the choir, because we want everybody there. So real quickly, can we think about who are sort of the go-tos that we know we can talk to, groups, friends, organizations, the usual suspects that we know we can get there? I'm going to get us started for 50 May.
Churches.
Colleges in New York City.
Colleges in New York City, because they don't have to travel so much. Environment Maine. Churches, someone said? Yeah. Usual suspect? Sierra Club? Sierra Club, sure.
If we know of anybody.
The investment group.
Students for Climate Justice, which I'm surprised is not more of them here.
University students in general.
Land trusts and there are a lot of them.
Land trusts. Land trusts. Although they need help politicizing. Faith leaders. Jackie.
Green Party.
The Green Party. Sorry, someone else say something?
The Environmental Health Strategy Center has been doing amazing mobilizing in Maine.
Yeah.
Protect South Portland?
Yeah. Portland Trails. Portland Trails. Great.
Teens to Trails.
Teens to Trails.
Rotary Club Network Organization.
Socialist Alternative.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Socialist Alternative.
Socialist
Alternative.
Socialist
I
Alternative.
think the closest chapter is Boston's.
They sound like great
Peace
songs.
and justice groups.
Peace and justice groups.
College of the Atlantic.
Transition groups.
Transition groups. COA.
My name is Glenn Brown. I'm the Sierra Club Maine chapter director based here in Portland. And we're here tonight to help organize the effort to get as many people as possible from Maine to go to the People's Climate March in New York City on September 21st. Towards that end, we're sponsoring buses. We're trying to get the word out. If folks want to ride the bus with us, it's a $30 round trip ticket, which is pretty affordable. To go to New York City on the 24th. We'll leave very early in the morning from Portland, probably other locations in Maine as we can figure it out. We'll probably stop in Portsmouth on the way down to New York City and come back that evening or very, very late at night. People can buy a ticket and on our website it's maine.sierraclub.org. And they can also send an email to maine.chapter@sierraclub.org to find out more information. We really need to make a big splash by bringing as many Mainers. Mainers deeply care about protecting our climate, and this is one way they can really get together and have fun doing it.
We have come too far, we won't turn around. We'll flood the streets for climate, we are New York bound. We have come too far, we won't turn around. We'll flood the streets for climate, we are New York bound. We have come too far, we won't turn around. We'll flood the streets for climate, we are New York bound.
We are New York bound.
We'll flood the streets with justice, we are freedom bound.